Hiking itself is incredibly simple, but the hiking industry is a much more complicated, difficult to deal with concept. And what I want to do in this introduction is share with you a couple of immediate trends in hiking, most of which are good news. Then a couple of storm clouds on the horizon, things that we really need to be thinking about for the future. And then place the presentations of our 4 panelists within this bigger structure. So the immediate news about hiking is good. The numbers of people getting active in the outdoors are growing, and hiking is the place that they start. When people are asked, people who aren't yet active, what they hope to do in the next 12 months, it's hiking. That is the very first thing that comes to mind. And hiking is not just where we enter the outdoors, it's also where we finish. There are now an enormous range of high adrenaline, exciting adventure products on the market aimed at the younger demographic. But all of those channel people towards hiking as the years go by. It's a way of staying engaged with the outdoors, and it's a way of staying part of the adventurous tribe. We all know that being outdoors is good for us, but then we are invested in this lifestyle. But the science is catching up with us. There's plenty of information, of research to say that getting out there walking is the very best thing you can do for physical health. But the science around mental health is absolutely fascinating. Depression, anxiety, ADHD, all these different things and more. It's looking like outdoor exercise is one of the most useful things you can try in managing these issues. There's other good news. We all know that the core market for the hiking business is white, wealthier, and older. And that demographic is growing, and it's growing fast. What this particular study calls the active third age, people over 60, that demographic is going to grow by 40% in the next 20 years. In the short term, there's plenty of potential for the hiking market. And there's other good news. There are now an exciting range of new ways to reach these people, to really share the excitement of what we find in the outdoors. And we've just seen an example of that, talking about athletes. The old days of an outdoor magazine with a circulation of a few thousand, a few 100,000 if you're lucky, that's mostly gone. Now it's the era of the Instagram stars. Jimmy Chin, he is a North Face athlete, National Geographic photographer. He has 1.2 million followers on Instagram. And this is a group of people who don't want to see, a staged photo shoot. They want to know what Jimmy Chin was doing this morning in the mountains. And this is changing the way that brands interact with their customers in the outdoor market. Because it's not just about what Jimmy Chin was doing this morning, it's about what all of us were doing this morning. Social media is letting us buy that equipment, go out to those locations, and then start sharing our excitement. And we're very fortunate to have with us this afternoon Andy Schimmer, the CEO of Marmot, and he's going to be talking to us about how Marmot positions their brand in this new social media landscape. But of course, to make this work, you need technology. People want to be connected. And yes, right now there is certainly a subsector of the market who go outdoors to get away from their telephone, to try and break the screen addiction. But I think that's going to dissipate. The next generation to come, the screens will be absolutely integral to how they live. They want to be able to share the adventure as it's happening. And that's going to mean that connectivity is pretty much mandatory. And this new connected social media-driven world changes the way that as providers we need to interact with the customers. It's no longer enough to scan your brochure and call it a website. The customers aren't looking at your websites. The customers are on Facebook, talking to each other, and then they're on Google. So you need to be right on top of your search engine optimization, and you need to be active on the social media networks, which is off-putting if technology and all this isn't your thing, but there's so much opportunity to be found out there. Talking to a couple of my friends who are hiking guides, every single one said it's about selling the enriched experience. It's about creating added value. That is what allows you to charge enough to be making a decent living as a hiking guide. And the social networks are what allow you to find new groups where you can create that added value. Just to take one example from here, Tanya went looking through Facebook groups in the UK for choirs, formal and informal groups of singers, and then persuaded them that the place they really ought to be singing is halfway up the French Alps. And she was right. It's working really well for her. So there's enormous potential in mining social networks. And we're very lucky to have with us Francesca Thiel, and she's going to be taking us on a deep dive into the German hiking market, more or less, and look at what German hikers are wanting from their outdoor experience and how you can create something that might help to provide that. So, there's plenty of good news in the hiking market. But there are also some long-term trends that we need to be thinking about. And the first big one is the relentless rise of the cities. We are at the moment in time when half the world's population now live in cities, and it's only going to increase. And that has real implications for us because all the data tells us people get into the outdoors as children. This is when they start. The vast majority get taken outside by their families, and then the second group start as young adults because they make friends with people who have already been taken outside by their families. If you don't get them young, you lose them as lovers of the outdoors. And today's children are not going outside. I mean, there's a lot of research around this. There's also a lot of hysteria. But at the basis, they seem to be saying that children today go outside half as much as their parents did when they were children. And the data shows us that of all the different aspects of the outdoor experience which are growing, it's actually the use of green space inside cities that's growing the fastest. But they're not going out there with the children. Of those people walking in parks, half of them are walking the dog. 10% have taken the children. Those children are indoors and they're plugged into their technological experience. And no, it's not just shoot-'em-up video games. Virtual reality is trying to go outdoors. And you can look at this. Oculus Rift takes up mountain climbing. And you can laugh and say this is never going to resemble the real experience. I don't know that we should be ignoring this, though. As someone pointed out this morning, Mark Zuckerberg was in Barcelona last week at the World Mobile Congress, and what he was announcing was a collaboration between Facebook and Samsung to create shared virtual reality experience. You'd be brave to bet against these people producing a very, very good experience. All the drama of the outdoors with none of the boring bits. But you can say, look, this is This is alarmist. It's ridiculous. There are hundreds of thousands of people going outdoors. We can see that. But that in itself is a problem. Pretty pictures of mountains get shared on social media, but it's photographs like these. Climbers in a queue at 8,800 meters on Everest. These are the photographs that go viral on social media. And it's not just Everest. Mont Blanc, 30,000 climbers a year. The mayor of Sant Julia calling Mont Blanc a heap of rubbish. I mean, none of this does any good when it comes to promoting the Tour de Mont Blanc as one of Europe's great hiking experiences. And with apologies, it didn't take me long to find the newspaper article that lists Machu Picchu and the Inca Trail as one of the world's most crowded tourist traps. And that's why it's so interesting to have Alfredo with us, who's going to talk about what it means to be the custodian of something like Machu Picchu. Something so beautiful, so popular. And then what does it mean for the rest of the country to have to live in the shadow of that one honeypot tourist destination? There's no doubt that the rise of the list ticking, whether it's the 7 summits or the 3 peaks or the top 10 hikes in Europe, has expanded the market. But it's brought some real difficulties with it, whether you're a winner or a loser on those lists. And there's another problem with the new social media-driven, image-driven world of the outdoors. Quick image search for hiking. Healthy, wealthy, and white. Which is pretty off-putting if you're not in one of those categories yourself. I was talking to a hiking guide in South Africa who was telling me that there's huge potential among Chinese tourists coming to South Africa, but that it's just too difficult. Dealing with the language and cultural barriers, it's not worth his time. He'd rather take tourists from Europe, North America. And again, this is why it's so interesting to have Catherine with us, to be talking to us about a cross-cultural initiative between France and South Korea, looking at what it means to reach out beyond our own cultures and try and create intercultural initiatives. But even that is still working at the wealthier end of the market, and there are so many other groups we could reach out to. Albert Levera mentioned briefly not ignoring the handicapped community. There's some real athletes out there, people interested in engaging with the outdoors. But there are other groups as well. And there's plenty of literature that tells us why deprived communities don't go outdoors. And many of these problems we can't solve. But there is a sort of sloppy shorthand that we use as an excuse. And again, talking to one particular guide, he simply summed it up as, black people don't climb rocks. It's not in their culture. And this is a lazy reason not to try and reach out to new groups in the outdoor market. Because it's not true. It's difficult when there are no role models from your community, when there's no cultural history of doing it, when you lack money to get to these places. But it's possible. There are markets out there that we can reach if we make the effort. And it's not about wagging a finger at them and telling them it would do you good to leave the city and go outside. It's about finding people from within those communities who are already activists for the outdoors and then supporting them in what they do, so that the message about the excitement of getting outdoors comes from inside the neighborhood. There is so much potential with the outdoor market and with the simplest of all of these activities, which is hiking. But it's a complicated, fractured market that battles to speak with a single voice. And it's a little too easy to be caught up in just trying to make a living, focusing on the corner of the market where the money is right now and trying to stay in business for another 5 years. And there's nothing wrong with that. But we don't just need hikers today. We need today's children to be getting out into parks in the cities so that they are tomorrow's adults who are coming out into the mountains with us, bringing their children. Not just because enjoying the mountains is good for them, but because they are advocates. They're advocates for the outdoors, they're advocates for environmental protection, they're advocates for living together, united with nature. And now we have a chance, with our panelists, to take a deep dive into a couple of these different areas.